Hello and welcome to Undercommon Taste. This is a podcast where we create and discuss homebrew content for tabletop RPGs.
Ignore the sense of injury, and the injury itself disappears.
I'm Ian Woodworth. I'm joined by my co-host James Daly, and today we have a special guest with us, Josh from Lone Colossus Games, to talk about his upcoming Kickstarter project, Injuries and Vile Deeds. Josh, welcome
Awesome.
to Undercommon Taste.
Hey,
Yes, thank you for joining us.
So
it's good to be here.
let's go ahead and start off. Give us a little bit of an introduction. Talk about some of the stuff that you do, who you are, your bank account number, whatever you're comfortable with.
Your social, blood type, just the basic stuff.
Yeah, I'm Josh. I've been publishing under the name Lone Colossus Games since last February, so a little over a year. Mostly stuff for 5e, but I've also been doing some other tabletop role-playing games. So I have a cyberpunk game out that's Cybercore Hack.
Nice.
It's just kind of a little mini game that I made in Caltrop Core for kind of tacking on a more fun hacking simulator to other cyberpunk games. But yeah, mostly I publish for 5e, make a lot of monsters, put out one roughly every month, and recently been doing more and also adding maps and adventures and stuff to that as well.
Excellent.
So
now we got to add this. I mean, we're doing the personal thing, and I think this is something we should start throwing in. What would your player class be?
I often default to like wizards or like knowledge clerics, anything that can do deep dives on lore.
Okay, I like it. Yeah.
I really like world building as a DM, and I really love exploring world building as a character, as a player. Yeah. So, yeah.
Lorekeeper Bard 3.5 was the best.
Yes, or Cloistered Cleric, because they also get
Cloistered Clerics.
Yes, nice.
Man after my own heart. I am cleric through and through. So
yes.
So, could you go into a little bit talking about what Injuries and Vile Deeds is and what sort of things you were going for with the project?
Yeah. So it's a supplement for 5e, mostly focused on enhancing combat. Specifically, it adds injury systems for player characters and then also for monsters and NPCs to the game, so that you can back up your awesome attack descriptions with actual mechanics. When you say, "Oh, I want to attack their sword arm," or you want to like try and cut out a tooth or like cut its claw off or something, like you can actually do that now.
Pocket sand.
And
yes.
And then at the same time, there's kind of this common issue that people would bring up. It's like, oh, my players, they don't really consider combat to be a threat. Like, you can just run in and you'll be fine. And there are certain things you can do that mitigate that, but there's also certainly a level of knowing that you're going to be perfectly fine after a long rest, or even sometimes like a short rest, right? Like monks pretty much reset on a short rest, and as long as you have hit dice, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And so having something that kind of makes you choose, do we really want to fight this or not, was definitely a driving goal initially. And then of course adding the injuries from monsters and NPCs, I think adds a lot to the game as well.
I like that. And even in most RPGs, be it video game, tabletop, whatever, player power creep really is a thing. And I mean, just about any RPG I can imagine that I've played or remember that I've played, you hit that mid-level, and it's kind of like you're not ready for the end boss yet, but everything else you're just kind of just wading through because nothing else. I mean, you got like your next level up on spells, you got that new set of armor in, you're kind of way past the starting area, but like I said, you're not ready for that boss yet. So everything in the middle just becomes that kind of grind where nothing's a threat, but it takes so long. You've got to just go and like stomp a bunch of rabbits to build up more XP points or whatever you need to do to kind of push yourself a little further. And it's fun for the first, 10, 15 minutes. And it's kind of like playing God mode on a video game. It's like, oh, the challenge is gone. Great.
It's like Ungaro Crater in classic World of Warcraft is,
Yeah,
it's the slog.
it is the slog, absolutely.
So what was your inspiration for this project? What, I mean, you went into it a little bit, but what
Yeah.
really inspired you to say, let's make combat mean something?
Yeah. So in addition to kind of what I already talked about with the you know, just lack of threat in combat. There's also I spent a year and a half running a game using the Edge of the Empire and Age of Rebellion systems from Fantasy Flight, which is their Star Wars system. I think
Okay.
there's a specific name for the dice system they have. It's sort of more narrative focused. But one of the things that I really liked about it was that a critical hit essentially could inflict an injury. And generally, you also got an injury whenever you went to 0 health. But characters in that game had very little health. It's like 15. So like when you get shot twice, yeah, you get injured. Like your hit points kind of were an actual measure of physical health. And so like if you got hit, you had to spend some time to recover. And if you got
Gotcha.
hit enough, then you got injured. And what I really liked about the way they handle injuries versus, you can find injury tables online for player characters. And it's usually just D%. And like, 50% of them are terrible and 50% of them are, or, 30% of them are like not so great. And then like 20% of them are actually like beneficial somehow. And it's perfectly random. Like you took 50 damage and suddenly you get an adrenaline boost. And now you have 20 more hit points and you're standing on your feet and you're fine. Versus like, oh, I took 1 damage, but it was from a critical somehow. I don't know. You have something
Yeah,
with
yeah.
D4 -2 or something, right? And like somehow now I've lost a limb from that. I don't understand how that happened. So what the Star Wars RPG did was they did still have, it was still random, it was still D%, but the more injuries you got, the worse it got. So you added 10 to your roll for every injury that you had, and you added 10 for like certain weapons that were more likely to inflict an injury, for example. So like I think like vibro axes or something had like plus 20 or something, because getting hit with an axe is pretty
Yeah.
horrible.
Was
And
that
so
Star Wars
they
system
you could
run
go
off
up
of
to like 100.
D6s? Sorry.
No, it runs off of like narrative dice, so it has symbols on
Okay.
it. They don't use numbers.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there were a lot of other cool things I love about that system.
Yeah.
But yeah, the injuries were something I took away from it. And then after many rounds of modification, we're kind of at where we are now, which is instead of having it be like a percentile table, you have multiple tables of different severity based on the damage that you take. And then there is some randomness to that. But of course, you could always select, the DM described that they were attacking my arm, so we're going to go with the arm injury on this one.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. So what you're describing with Star Wars sounds a lot like, and it's something I've been getting into a bit, but the Alien RPG, and they use the 6-sided narrative die. It's not a regular D6, but the same thing. And they have the same, like they have the injury tables, and once you drop to 0 or you panic, you start picking up these injuries, and they accumulate over time, or they outright kill you depending on what the
Right.
system is. So yeah, it sounds a lot similar along those lines too. And I like how you said, where you can make it so where if you get a critical hit, that's something. It's one of the things that I've always played with as a house rule, that if you roll 2 natural 20s in a row, or sometimes I've heard it's 3 natural 20s in a row, no matter what the monster is, it's an insta kill. But if the player rolled a natural 20 and their next roll was like a 15 or a 16, not quite a 20, I always like, try to figure out a way, like, can we permanently injure this critter or monster? Or can we do, put us? So I like that, because that feels correct with that theme. Again, you shouldn't just be able. It's a critical hit, so you roll some extra dice, so you lose a little bit more hit points. It should have a little more oomph to a critical hit. It should
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
critical.
And these systems aren't like tied to a critical, but obviously getting a crit,
Yeah,
grossly increases your damage and, greatly increases the chance you inflict an injury.
right.
That was something else I was going to say about that, but I forget. So I'm sure it'll come
Who
up later.
knows?
And that's kind of like the basis behind the house rule for, critical hits dealing max base damage plus the die roll, as opposed to just doubling the roll or just doubling the dice. Because
Yeah.
if you roll low on your dice, then suddenly the crit didn't actually mean anything. You know,
Yeah, I rolled ones.
you know, you get a crit with your great axe, and then you roll a 1 on your d12.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
doesn't feel
that's
good.
no, it
Whereas
really doesn't. I've done
And
that
whereas
it,
before.
you just set it as base 12 plus a d12 plus your
yeah.
modifiers.
And
Yeah,
that's
Then it
kind of how
actually
4e
feels
worked.
right.
Yeah, fourth edition kind of did that. So like
Yeah.
magic weapons, the bonus damage was only on crits, but when you got a crit, you always maxed the weapon dice, and then you added more. And then if you had like a vicious weapon, it would add another die. Or brutal critical, I think, added more dice.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I also like one of the things you mentioned that you got a lot of your ideas and stuff from the Star Wars things, which is great because I did want to bring that up because a lot of your things remind me of some of the other games. Like you have a stagger type thing, which basically makes your player they don't take any extra HP damage, but their turn goes to the end of the initiative order. That's a
yeah,
condition you see like in Darkest Dungeon 2. You know, limb injuries and things like that kind of reminded me things of like XCOM or even like Fallout 1 or 2 where you could target a limb and kind of like
sure.
limit what they could do or how they could act. It kind of had that feel. I'm like, I really, yeah, I'm really feeling how this lines up. It felt really good.
It's not just Fallout 1 and 2. That's still a thing in the Fallout games.
Yeah,
With VATS you can target the arms or the arms to make them drop weapons, or legs to cripple them and make them
right.
stop them moving, or shoot them in the head and reduce their accuracy or
Perception.
whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
All
no,
right.
it has that feel. And like I said, it's definitely, especially when it's a beefier opponent, and that's the thing is a party could actually go after a beefier opponent if they fought strategically and
Yeah,
tried to target
yeah.
specific areas to kind of break down their opponent first.
Yeah, I've definitely found the injury systems in a single combat often benefit the players because adding all of these, debuffs to your enemies is really strong. It's when you get into multiple combats in a row that the party really starts to suffer.
Yeah,
And so, you get into these interesting scenarios where the party has to make a decision: do we keep going, or do we stop for a few days and rest these off, or do we, heal them and kind of push through the lasting pain.
right. And I love that you bring that choice to your players because again, it shouldn't just be a slog. You shouldn't like, oh, we'll rest. Resting should cost the party something because again, generally time
Yeah.
should be of the essence, And again, likewise, there should be a choice to rest. You shouldn't just be like, yeah, I can just roll through whatever. So yeah, that should always be at least a little bit of limit. Do we rest now or do we want to rest later? Do we want to save that time and those resources? Or can we go ahead and push what we're doing now? So that should always be, a consideration in my mind.
And especially since in your system, as I read it, um, depending on the severity of the injury, it takes a certain amount of extra time to heal.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
so it suddenly is no longer the truth that we just go and we take a long rest and everything is fine. There's
Right.
there's still that you know we could push on, but the injury I have right now is going to take 3 long rests to clear. If we keep going, I could end up with something that can lay me up for 6 or 8 or 12 long
Right.
rests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
And
it does add a little bit of that resource management, a little bit of that uh, risk management sort of
Yes.
aspect to it as well.
yeah. And I was very careful, and we'll see through more playtesting, what people think of this, but I was very careful to make sure that the injuries are often kind of severe in the moment, but once you've gotten past a certain point, you've kind of figured out how to deal with it for now. It's more that so the effect might wear off, right? So like a lot of the lowest severity, you might have an issue for the encounter or until you finish a short rest, but after that the effect is gone, but you still have that injury for a couple of days, right? And so if you get another injury at that severity, it automatically gets bumped up to the next severity, and then now you have to deal with something worse, and so on. And so of course it more becomes a point of, it's not, oh, I have so many debuffs I just can't do anything anymore. It's the next injury I get could kill me, right?
Right.
And so do we keep going or do we wait and hopefully avoid something that horrible happening? And of course you can remove them more quickly, but at some cost.
Right. Now, something I would actually like a little bit of a rules clarification on, if you don't mind. You have a couple status effects in there that I really like. One was like a bleed or like a sprained ankle or type things. Excuse me. But they say you can wait, or if you take your next turn, that next action you'll take, it was like 1d6 damage for whatever. Would that count outside of combat as well for something like Final Fantasy VII, where you're poisoned, and if you don't treat that poison, you're still like walking
Yes.
through the map pinging hit points, and it's like, hey, wait.
Yes. Yeah, some of those injuries, if you don't treat them right away, you're basically just going to be unconscious after combat, because it goes through your hit points quickly.
Yeah,
Of course, if you don't take an action, then you can move for free, right? But if you're running, you're gonna keep bleeding out.
gotcha.
Okay. So
No,
you talked a little bit about healing these injuries. Can you go into a little bit of detail on how exactly you heal these injuries, or how you can recover, and the role that say magical healing plays in recovering from these injuries?
Yeah. So I guess the natural way of healing. So the number of rests that it requires assumes you have some medical attention. Someone in your party is proficient with medicine, or at least like you have like a healer's kit or something that you can at least bandage your wounds and provide a splint or whatever you need. Without that, it would be doubled. And so if you rest and just let it heal naturally, then you're going to be fine. There's no lasting effect or anything from that. If you if you want to have it recovered more quickly, and some of these you really do want to have them recovered faster, just because you don't want to be walking around with
Internal
that
bleeding.
injury for the entire
yeah,
day, or some of them do last beyond a long rest. Some of the very severe ones are pretty awful. And so someone can make an action to make a medicine check, and it's a pretty tough DC. But if you get within 5 of that, then you can at least try again the next round, and they'll ignore the effects for a round, so it can help in combat, especially. Or as as has happened in my party, if you're the healer and you have to make a medicine check on yourself and you're bleeding out, so every time you take an action you lose hit points. If you at least get within 5, you're going to not lose health the next round, which gives you another round to try
try to
again.
heal. Yeah,
Yeah. So essentially, if you make that medicine check, then you can remove the effects of the injury, but you get a lasting effect based on the severity of the injury. And that just sort of represents, yes, you've dealt with the main problem. The person's not as at as much of risk of getting a worse injury in the future, just because they're not like actively dealing with that, but their body is still recovering, and so it's going to take some time. And because they're pushing themselves and they're still going out fighting and not just resting, I mean, technically there's no mechanical difference between taking a long rest and like taking a whole day to rest.
right.
But usually, if people are worried about it, then they'll just take the time and rest. So it represents that you're not fully at fighting capacity. And the same thing happens when you heal with magic. When you use a spell or a potion as part of that, you can still restore hit points. So I think it was important to me to keep the action that you use to cast the healing spell and the action you use to make the medicine check the same, because I don't want it to kind of be this, the healer has to be constantly healing people,
Right.
and that's all they get to do. So I made that part of the same action. And so they'll get hit points back that restores their stamina, and then also you can per level of the spell you get a bonus to your medicine check. So if you are a magical healer, you're a lot better at potentially removing an injury mid combat, or just quickly. And then of course I like to flavor it as well. Your body is not intended to heal from an injury, even if you could flavor it in world as you have perfectly removed this injury, and like there's no sign of it anymore. You don't have a splint or like bandage or anything, perfectly healed, but your body is kind of exhausted because you have drawn on its natural healing ability beyond what it's supposed to do. And so you still have something left over that your body is just not quite there. You get that lasting effect. So something like regenerate obviously should heal any injury, but you're still going to have that lasting effect from it. So I would say something like regenerate, you'd just skip the medicine check entirely and you just succeed.
Okay.
But you know,
I mean, which is appropriate for what is it, a 6th or 7th level spell?
Yeah.
It's a pretty substantial hunk of magic.
I'm gonna go ahead
and you get like 1 per day or 2 per day.
I'm gonna just drop wish. Yeah, no, I wish my sprained ankle was better. Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, no, you got to roll a medicine check.
Yeah.
No, I like that. How did you determine at what level to set your injuries and the damage? Because like you said, a lot of these they don't seem like much, but again, you start rolling a 1d6 each turn, and these can add up really, really fast.
Yeah. So the thresholds, I guess, for the injuries, the amount of damage you need to take to get one, those were originally set as a percentage of max health, which very quickly became obviously unwieldy because you'd have to recalculate every single time you leveled up. And, for monsters, you'd have to calculate it for every single unique hit points. So that got converted into kind of like the nearest rounded to 5, and then sort of set with various hit point thresholds by like kind of 50s, I think, or 25s. Okay. And that, kind of approximates that curve relatively well. So they're set up so that at low levels, like player characters are basically never going to instantly gain a really high level, a really high severity injury, because it would be like 300% of their health and they would already be dead anyway.
We're not going to class the long of a level 2 player. We're not doing it, Joe. We're not doing it.
And I did suggest maybe you don't use the really high level injuries at low levels, because 5 hit points is like your entire hit point pool, and if you take that as an action, that just doesn't seem fair. So I suggest waiting until you have enough
stuff.
Until you have enough hit points in the party to actually kind of pull those out. But if you really want a lethal game, you can absolutely do it. I just probably wouldn't.
I was going to say you do.
And then
go ahead. Sorry.
I was just for the like how bad the injuries are. Yeah, it's kind of based on what seems like it's actually going to have an effect, but also without being like utterly debilitating for the level that I expect people to start getting them at.
I was going to say, at the beginning of your book, you do note that by and large, you really shouldn't use these for players who have under 50 hit points. And that's going to average out to probably between level 7, level 10-ish, depending on,
and that's for the really high, the third level, I believe, third through like 5th or something.
So these are definitely, like I said, not so much for your 1 through 5s, but you're a little further on. You start getting some magic items.
5th level,
start throwing some injuries in.
5th level, your fighters and paladins and barbarians for sure probably are going to have over 50, and then absolutely I would not use it if anyone in the party is under 25 hit points, because they're absolutely brutal at that point.
I can definitely see that, because there are some of these injuries that are really nasty.
Yeah, they are. But I love the detail. I love that they're there. Just, again, they sound bad, but they should sound bad, because you're getting pummeled in combat. It's not like you're not doing a slap fight. You're bashing each other with clubs and swords, and
And what I've found is, and this is exactly how I intended it to work, so I'm super happy that it's working this way, is that typically you only get setback severity, and in fact, while you are conscious, you can only get setback severity injuries. It's just if you are already injured, then you get a higher level injury. So it's the intent is you will kind of stack up these severities as you go through combat, and if you're cautious, or you take your time to rest or heal between combats, then you won't necessarily be racking up a bunch of injuries at higher levels. Or if you fight, if you're like a level 6 and you're fighting a CR9 dragon, you might get a handicap injury right away. Like their breath weapons do like 60 damage.
They're wrecking your guy. One of the last campaigns I played before the pandemic started, we had a bunch of characters of like level 3 and 4, and we came across the green dragon. I'm like, dude, run, we can't fight this. And they're like, no, we're gonna. I'm like, no, dude, run. And so like one breath weapon TPK. We're like, and that's the party.
Yep. Oh. Oh,
I love in here, just kind of hinting along the lines of some of the stuff that they can find in the book. Some of these injuries, like I said, that are on the more severe side, you instantly fail one of your death saves. And it's like, ooh, oh, that's just that puts the fear of some god into you.
yeah, that would do it. Yeah, it's you really don't want to hit 0 because all of a sudden it only takes 2 bad rolls to kill you,
Yeah,
Or a nat one,
or a nat
yeah,
1, yeah,
one, and
or
that
or,
5%
someone
chance.
or
There you
attacking.
someone
go.
coming up and smacking you with a stick. Yeah,
Yeah.
And that's and again, that kind of goes. These injuries have that feel of emergency. Again, they are something pivotal. They do turn battle, and I love that because it makes it where you're like, okay, I can take the swing, or do I want to take cover? But extra damage, extra cover, extra damage, extra cover. What's my hit pool at? And you start
Yeah.
pondering more, and it should be something you fret over.
Yeah.
It
And
should
it
be just a
really
touch of anxiety
changes
at the table.
it really changes the dynamic of fighters, especially, and barbarians and rangers. Basically, all of the martial classes feel so much better. That was one of the main pieces of feedback I've gotten from playtesters so far, is that when you play a fighter normally, or a barbarian, right, unless you're playing like a battle master, every turn is the same. You attack,
Yeah.
right? What that attack outcome is just how much damage you do. With the injury systems for the PC's enemies, right? Now it's like, okay, I'm gonna like try and disable their sword arm, or I'm gonna, try and prevent it from using its breath weapon by like stabbing it in the throat,
Yeah, no,
right?
I love that.
And then of course there are also special injuries, so that can just kind of cover anything else that's not already covered. So one example is, a player of mine wanted to make it so that someone couldn't call for help. It's like, okay, great, we'll call it like a silencing strike, right? And do like a throat punch or whatever.
Yes.
Probably shouldn't be able to do it with a dagger. I guess you could hit them with the pommel, but
Almost something, yeah.
dagger to the
Yeah.
throat should just kill you.
Yeah, generally.
But yeah, so it kind of covers all of those other side things. And so if you're like, oh, I want to do this really cool maneuver that would like debuff this enemy in this way, how can I do that? The GM can just go, okay, yeah, I think that's probably like we'll call it like dangerous severity injury, so you need to get this much damage with your action, and go for it.
I like it.
So, how can you go into a little bit about how you would actually go to specifically try and inflict an injury? Because it has a lot of feel of the called shot systems that you see in some
Yeah,
games.
Yeah, it's I think it's a lot better than the old editions called the shots, which were just a huge attack penalty and often didn't work out very well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very much like that. Essentially, I guess there are two ways of doing it. One way would just pure mechanics would be, okay, I'm taking the attack action, I'm declaring my intent to injure, and I want to go for their attacks, and we'll say I'm going to attack their sword. I don't know if they have two weapons, like a sword and a scimitar or something. You could choose, or if it's like a natural. So if you have like a monster, like a dragon that has like claws and wings and tails, you could choose which weapon you want to go for, and then you would roll your attacks, roll your damage, compare the total damage against their threshold, and if you meet it, then you inflict the injury. So that would just be pure mechanics. Descriptively, of course, you could go, okay, I'm going to run up and I'm going to stab it in the foot and see if I can, reduce its mobility. And then the GM would go, okay, that sounds like you're trying to inflict a mobility injury, and then you go ahead and make your attacks, describe your attack roll, and then deal your damage. And then if you inflict the injury, then the GM or you could describe how, let's say, okay, you got a handicap severity injury. All right, how does that look? Versus like, okay, you got all the way up to maimed. So, it's not going to really be walking anywhere. It's going to be super slow. Describe how that looks, right? So I think there's a lot more opportunities for description, or if you're already, to encourage description. And if you're already describing things now, you just have mechanics to go, okay, yeah, that's what that's going to do. So, and then, the other mechanical part is there is a bit of a gamble. So obviously injuries are great, and they have a lot of mechanical effect. So there needs to be, or at least I think there probably should be some mechanical trade-off to it. And so my flavoring of the damage loss that you see on injuries and lower hit point monsters just don't have that, because they like otherwise it would just not make sense to injure them, almost, because you're more effective at just hitting them 3 times and killing them.
Right.
And so you may as well, allow them to injure and do full hit point damage. But higher level monsters have a bunch of hit points, and it's often more efficient to injure them, because if you get enough injuries on them, you can try and do a death blow, which kills them outright. And so there is this damage loss mechanic. We'll see. I think playtesting, we'll find out if that's the best way to do it, or if there's another trade-off that we could do. But currently it's set up that way. And the way I flavor it is you are putting your all into physically hurting them. And hit points are not physical health. Hit points are stamina. And so if they cannot avoid the attack, then it's not going to affect their stamina as much, right? So you actually hit them with the attack, which means that, they still have some of that stamina left to try and avoid a future blow, but, you physically harmed them, so they have this injury. I think generally speaking, the injuries are going to be worth the trade-off, but there may be some cases where your tactic is in fact to just wear them down and then kill them. So
right. That concept that hit points or stamina is actually something I've just recently come across, and I've seen it a couple of times, probably in the past 3 or 4 weeks. And it makes sense, as, taking a boxer, you're getting hit and you're pummeled and you're not worried about dying, but as your hit points go down, you become sluggish, you become tired, you become less reactive, and so you are more likely to get hit. Therefore, that last blow is more likely to land.
Yes.
And again, that in a way, in a storytelling way, makes a lot of sense that I never considered. So I like that concept, and I will probably start working that into my storytelling as I DM in the future.
Yeah, and it really it makes so much more sense when you consider that your commoner has 6 hit points, right?
Yeah.
But a 20th level barbarian has 250. And it's why does this person, can they really be stabbed 300 times before they die? Probably
Right.
not. It's probably more that, they could be cut, they could take a few scratches 300 times, and then the killing blow would land because they've lost enough stamina.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it was a Matt Colville video, one of his running the game videos from forever ago. And I don't remember if this is a Matt Colville original or if this was him relating how someone else summarized it, but he referred to thinking of HP not as health points, but as hero points, heroism points.
Yes.
So this is how much you're willing to expend to make that heroic action to avoid the crippling blow, to avoid the death blow.
Yes.
And then after a certain point in the fight, you run out of those points to spend to avoid the hit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of how I try and narratively run my games as well, is, I don't say that, whenever you're at full hit points and somebody shoots you with an arrow, oh, you get shot and it's sticking out of your shoulder. No, that is a crippling injury.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to get up and keep fighting, most people anyway, with an arrow sticking out of your shoulder. That's a pretty debilitating thing that's going to take most fighters out of the fight entirely.
Right.
So
even just mechanically, you're not going to be able to.
Right. Yeah. And so it's, narratively describing, how it hits and glances off of your armor, and you can feel the bruise coming up underneath it, but it isn't actually inflicting any real maiming injury.
Right.
Yeah. You mentioned hero points, and that just reminded me. One of the things that
That was a tick. Sorry.
One of the other things that I really like about having 2 systems is you can use one or the other. You don't have to use both. So if you want a really heroic game where, the players are not going to get injured, but they are going to inflict these horrible wounds on their enemies, you can do that, right? Or if, on the other hand, you don't want to deal with, you don't want to have them inflicting injuries. You want it to be a really greedy game where the PCs get beaten down a lot. Probably not my game, but if you really wanted that, you can just have injuries for player characters. You don't have to use it for the monsters.
Summon Bruce Willis and play some Die Hard.
That's sort of the the sword and sorcery superhero version of D&D versus the low fantasy gritty
Right.
D&D.
Yeah.
You know, sort of the almost
Excalibur
the
versus Game of Thrones.
Spelljammer versus Dark Sun.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sort of dynamic a little bit. But yeah, that is a great point to make. So another thing, something that you brought up early on in the interview, and something included in the book, creatures. You have
Yes.
several creatures at the end of the book. At least the playtest copy that we got for review. I don't know if there's going to be any more in the final release version, but
Yeah.
so what was your influence in some of these creatures, especially was it the fallen angels?
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of the creatures in the I will go ahead. I would say I would estimate 50% of the monsters in the book are straight out of my nightmares.
Nice.
One of them is called a chain spider. It's not actually a spider. It's more like it's a humanoid that's been like magically surgically modified and had metal grow through its body in kind of horrifying, very painful ways. And it can kind of do his Spider-Man thing with webs, except they're barbed chains instead.
So something you'd see in a Doom
So-
game, basically, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I like it.
that one was particularly horrifying to literally see in my dreams. But I immediately woke up and wrote it all down. So
Yes.
it's great inspiration. The fallen angels, they were a monster that I made for one of the first campaigns that I ran using the injury system. The Angel of Blood, actually, I have a pin right here.
Nice.
I don't know how well that shows up on the camera, but these are awesome. They're going to be part of the early bird special, and also they're an add-on and part of some of the higher tiers. Super, super, super cool. Anyway, so they have these serrated great swords, and yeah, the inspiration was really just I needed some evil angels to represent the forces that they were fighting against. It was a kind of downfall of Bahamut becoming a shadow dragon, and
Ooh.
so the aspect that they were fighting was producing the Angels of Blood literally out of crystals on its back. The party was kind of fighting to bring it down from the sky, and then they had to fight it on the ground. It was like the CR-24 monster they fought at the end of the campaign.
Nice.
But I don't know if you remember, so like 3.5 had these like colossal plus monsters. It was definitely in that category. It was massive.
Those things are huge.
But yeah, so they were just sort of supposed to be fodder for really high level characters, but they were also they need to be dangerous enough. So they have these serrated greatswords can cause bleeding wounds that stack, and that inspiration, I guess, is kind of just from video games, right? Like I really like stacking debuffs, where the more you get hit with it, the worse it gets up to a limit, and then maybe like once you hit that limit, then something worse happens. So there are a few monsters that have that sort of mechanic. Not a lot, because it's not always easy to track stacks, but you can always mark like bleeding 1, bleeding 2, bleeding 3.
Right.
Yeah, we ran into that mechanic in our most recent episode. We were talking about Gehenna, and one of the monsters native to Gehenna is called the Slasrath. It's this weird flying ray thing that has a poisonous stinger. And in second edition, each time you failed your con save against the poison, you took a stacking -1 penalty to attack and damage rolls, ability checks, and saving throws. And when you hit 6 stacks, you died.
Right.
And we were talking about how you could take that mechanic and bring it into 5th edition, and how the way that we were thinking would be the best way to tie it over is each time you fail your con save, you get a rank of exhaustion.
Yep. That's exactly
because then
really stacks.
Yeah, because then at the end it still has that you hit 6 and you're dead.
Right.
Yep.
And it matched the narrative feel of what it was going for too, because it's all talking about you get sluggish and your response time gets slowed down and you can't do what you're supposed to do as well as you can. And
Right.
so that adding a stack of exhaustion each time you get hit really felt like the right translation for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only other thing I can think of that would even come close to using stacking, and that's something that Ian and I came up with a while back, but with some of our games that we've done, alcohol, drinking and intoxication, stuff like that.
Yeah.
We made that a stacking effect just because that feels right for that. So yeah, we do tend to like stacking effects. We just don't get to see them too terribly often.
Yeah.
Because it's a complicated bookkeeping thing.
Yeah.
You have to keep track of how many stacks you got.
Right. Let's see, other monsters. So there's I guess there are a few templates. So Chain Spider is one of the templates. It's a template for humanoids. And there was another, I think, like monstrous.
You had some angels in there too, I believe. You had some angels.
So there's angels. The angels were in. Yeah, so that one's not a template. It's just kind of a flavorful bit about fallen angels. I have a vampire template with like a kind of higher level bloodlord that kind of controls other vampires. That's very inspired by the Castlevania Netflix show. Kind of, you have these like high level vampires that control just minions basically. And the minions are ridiculously strong, but when you actually fight a bloodlord, then it's like, oh, okay, this is a real vampire.
Yeah.
And then the Fallen, not to be confused with Fallen Angels, those are heavily inspired by Reavers from Firefly. So Zaphrax is in that sample PDF.
Yes.
He's an old red dragon that's been kind of scarred and corrupted into a creature that literally just wants to spread pain and destruction to the entire world.
That'll happen.
The Fallen are essentially beyond any saving. Their entire purpose is to spread horrifying pain and torture to other creatures, and make their friends watch and turn them into themselves. It's absolutely horrifying, and something you probably need to you absolutely need to make sure that that's okay with your players before you put that in your game. But I do kind of love that. They're also a very deadly creature in that sense, because I guess kind of like the way shadows are, right, where they can be really low CR because they don't have a lot of hit points, but if they actually inflict injuries or drop people to 0, then you start running the risk of failing enough saving throws that you turn into one of them. Which is
shadows punch way above their CR, just like will-o-wisps do.
Yep.
And then speaking of stacking effects, there's going to be some diseases. So similar to how 4th edition diseases worked, there's going to be different kind of levels. So as you progress through the disease, it gets worse. Other stuff in the book: items, spells, feats, subclasses, lair magic. There's going to be a few spells. I think 9 spells that are enchanting your villain's lair, basically. So they're kind of these like 2-mile wide radius auras that enhance the terrain or enchant it in some way. So you could have like a haunted forest, or like, let's say your lair is on top of a volcano. Right now you have like molten lava, rocks just raining down from the sky all the time. Because it's constantly erupting now.
Right. No, I love that.
And of course the villain is going to be safe from that, because that's part of the spellcast is like, oh, you and some other creatures, you're going to be fine. Everyone else, not so much fun. Some of your minions might not like you so much.
We're going to have this, miasmic fog of sulfur gas that just hovers over my lair.
Yes. Was that Shrek? It's brimstone.
All right. So the last question that I have is, what is the next project? Is there a next project, or have you been focusing so much on injuries and vile deeds that you haven't had a chance to think about what's coming up down the road?
There are so many next projects. The only one that I guess there are kind of two, really just one, but there are two that I've publicly announced. One is completely the opposite direction of Injuries and Vile Deeds. It's the Wyrmlings Rpg. It's a very wholesome, kids-friendly tabletop role-playing game where you play as Wyrmlings who attend dragon school. They go on adventures and overcome challenges with their friends.
Oh, that sounds fun.
It's I originally ran it as kind of a Fate one-shot, and decided it needed its own system. So working on that. Hopefully I'll have something kind of ready for playtest later this year. But we'll
That's
see.
a great one. I think there needs to be more kid-oriented or younger-oriented games to kind of slowly get them in. I mean, D&D, a lot of the tabletop games we have now are great, and they can be great for kids, but it's generally a fairly big jump to jump right into. So if you can kind of get something and kind of work them in, that's great.
Yeah. And then I guess the other thing that I've technically announced, but only really through my Cybercore hack game, is I'm intending to turn that into a full cyberpunk game. So there'll be like a street version, physical meat space version of that game that would be called maybe Cybercore Run. And then I have like at least 3 more D&D book ideas. One is focused on again, more like role-playing oriented things, so things to encourage character development over the course of play. And then another one is more focused on items and kind of enhancing your magic items and magic weapons, and the effects they can have, especially, I guess, kind of oriented around critical hits. I think they could do more. I really like the way 4th edition handled that. On that side of things, I did miss the like damage on hit. Every hit should deal extra damage instead of just being, well, this weapon does cold damage now. But I did like their crits; they were fun.
Yeah. All right, I think I am done. James, are you done?
Yeah, no, that's my questions I've got. So,
all right. Well, that brings us to the end of the interview, and now it brings us into the part that we love the best. One of the things we love to do with our guests is to roll some dice on our monster mashup table and create a creature on the fly. So, Josh, if you've got some dice, let's go ahead and get started. All right. So the first roll we're going to have tonight is a D4 roll for its mode of locomotion.
That is a 3.
3? It burrows.
Ooh.
Okay. This can go a lot of different directions, so far okay. I'm not saying bot flies, I'm just saying bot flies.
Of course you are.
It's going to be a running thing from now on. It's just there.
And given what Josh has said about his nightmare fuel creatures, I might get outvoted today. All right, next up is a D6 roll for what does it eat?
Once again, 1 less than the max. That is 5.
5. It eats living meat.
Oh my! It's not carrion. It's not dead meat. It's eating you while you're still alive. We are coming up with some nice nightmare fuel. I love it. I
like this direction.
All right. This is going to inform a lot. A D8 roll for size.
5 again.
5. It is large.
Okay.
I suppose we could. It could be worse. It could be huge or gargantuan.
We're rocking some Dino DNA. We've got some Jurassic Park stuff coming along here.
It could be tiny.
Yeah.
Ooh, that would be terrifying.
Ian was very thankful it wasn't.
I was very happy you didn't roll a 1 or a 2. I did not want to deal with a diminutive burrowing flesh eater. All right. Next, we're going to have another D8 roll for social organization.
6.
Gang. 11 to 25 individuals.
Okay. I'm seeing like a pack of theropods or something like
Probably,
that.
it probably still would have been worse if it was tiny.
They're burrowing though. Yeah, it would have been. This
Yeah,
would have been horrifying if it was tiny.
yeah.
Something that burrows. Again, these could be like sea worms. They could be.
It, the thing that you run
Giant
into for
earthworms.
a D&D parallel, something like a boulette or like an
Yeah.
onkeg.
You know what this?
Um,
Well, except for the size, because the size is wrong. But the killer rabbit from Monty Python. But just giant. Maybe it's a giant killer Easter bunny.
we already had that. We had that whenever we did Welcome to the Internet.
Yes, we did.
Whenever we did our first our inaugural Twitch stream,
Yes.
and that was we ended up rolling horde on that one, and I
Yeah.
think they were bigger. I think it was a huge
Was it huge or
100
colossal?
plus.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't colossal. I think it was
Okay.
huge,
Okay.
and it was basically Bugs Bunny out in the out in the desert.
Yeah.
Is how it ended
It's
up.
like, I think there's an anime. No, it's Kipo. Kipo in the Age of Wonder Beasts. There's some like giant 8-legged rabbits that like all they care about is protecting their young. So if you get the scent of one of their young on you, they'll like chase you across the world,
Oh,
trying to bring
nice.
you back to their den.
I like it.
Oh
And you can't
dear.
never leave.
All right. Next is a D10 roll for native environment.
This will
9.
tell us a lot.
9. Well, that's appropriate for a burrowing flesh eater. Swamps/bogs/marshes.
Okay, I'm loving it. I am loving this. Maybe something like a burrowing crocodile, or what are the weird toad creatures you love? Never remember their name.
Bullywugs?
Yeah, something along those lines. Maybe something amphibian or reptilian.
Yeah, I definitely think that it should be amphibious.
Yeah,
Like
amphibious, and
properly
they have the different
amphibious.
life stages. So maybe they burrow when they're younger, and then they can.
It could be a turtle of some kind, actually.
Yeah, I can see that
Could
too.
be.
Where they'd
Yeah.
swarm like a bunch of sea turtles. Okay, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, just because they eat living flesh doesn't necessarily mean they have to be like uber aggressive. They could, just kind of be ambush predators or whatever. So yeah,
Or it's a large snapping turtle that
Yeah.
burrows.
no, that
They
makes
they
sense.
pretend to be islands, and then when you get comfortable, they just drown you and then eat.
Yeah,
All right. So this is going to inform a great deal on a D12 roll for method of defense.
10.
10. Hammer limbs/powerful kicks. It's blunt force trauma. That's
seeing
its
some
method of
flippers.
defense.
it's Nessie. Holy crap! We're doing a burrowing
Yes.
Nessie. It's a Leopleurdon, Charlie.
Oh. But yeah, I mean, that powerful kicks, that lends itself well to a burrowing creature because it's going to have the powerful
Yeah.
limbs in order to be able to burrow.
I would even translate that to a powerful kick. It could also be like a tail whip.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, because it does say hammer limb, so
Yeah,
anything that is going to be a
large
solid
blunt trauma.
stout, as
Yeah,
like like an ankylosaurus's tail would be
Yeah.
considered a hammer limb.
This is something that's going to come up and like slap you, smack you into a tree, and then when you're dazed, it's going to go over and start munching on you.
Yeah.
I can see
yeah,
it. I see this being kind of a slowish creature.
What about like a burrowing goose?
Oh, I love it. I love it. A burrowing
Their,
cobra
their
chicken.
wings are.
But I'm liking what you're saying about it being like an ambush predator.
Yeah,
Because and I can almost see it like having an eating habit like a snake where it swallows its food whole. And
Yeah.
basically this hammer limb is it just pulverizing everything to turn the once creature into a fleshy goo sack to make it go down easier.
what I love about this, what I absolutely love about this is, again, one of the injuries in the book that we've described is that dazed or that stun effect, which immediately drops your action to the end of the initiative order. So maybe this like instantly causes that daze effect, so it gets that chance to try to swallow you. I
Yeah,
think you could really marry those two in really well together.
I do like that as well. Yeah. All right. I think we need a little bit more in order to settle down on this thing's final form. So next up
I've
is
not reached
a
that final form.
D20 roll for quirks.
2.
2. This one seems to be real popular. Mimic is able to appear as another creature common in the environment.
Okay. Again, I would say
Doesn't
it's probably
necessarily
looking
have
like
to be
plant
a
life.
creature, though.
I was gonna say probably like plant life, maybe like a fallen log, or maybe like a clump of grass or something like that, and that would
I mean,
lead to it
It's
still being
very
an understudy.
alligator like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what if
I'm a
it's
muggle log.
something? What if it's something like a treant,
Yeah.
where most of it is below the ground level, and then it has this protruding bit up above that just looks
Okay.
like a tree. It's just a tree, and then you go
It's
and
a
walk past it, and then whoop!
Oh, I love it. It's a
it's a
whack-a-mole.
tree roper.
It's a
It's like a tree
Yeah,
roper. It's just like its roots are the tendrils, and it like sends them through the ground and then like sprouts up and grabs people and
yeah.
yes,
buries
That's how it starts the
yes.
burrowing. Yeah.
slams them against the ground until they're dead, and then drags them under and
This
devours
is
them.
this is a lot like our grove digger,
Yes.
uh, except for that was more of a
Parasite.
centipede sort of creature that burrows up into the tree and then uses the tree as sort of a living armor.
Oh. Yeah,
That's
this
really
is
cool.
going to be more like the Whomping Willow from the Harry Potter books.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I know this is premature, but I already have a decent name for it.
Okay.
Widowmaker.
I'm
Because
liking it.
that's what you call the freestanding dead trees out in the woods.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
because you go to start cutting on them, they look sound, but the inside of them is all rotten out, and you go and they explode open and they fall over on top of you and kill you.
And then they eat you. Yeah. No, I love that. Sounds like that's what this thing's doing. I love it.
If that
Do you
is
remember
where we
the?
end up going,
Okay.
um, because we do have two final rolls here,
Yes.
because now we get to make it weird.
I was gonna say there's the trees in the Lost Woods in Breath of the Wild that have like the mouth
Yeah.
opening on them.
Yeah.
This feels very much like them.
Okay, so I need a D100 roll.
51.
51.
I think we had a 51 last week.
Yes, we did. Can be used in lieu of currency in the local economy. Each individual is worth 1d10 gold. I don't know how we're gonna.
lumber.
I don't know how we're gonna do this.
Lumber, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, lumber.
Or specifically like the core maybe of the tree.
Okay.
Maybe
So you have to like
like
the outside is all like, yeah, like it like contains there's I don't know if you've played Divinity Original Sin 2. There's a like a special elven tree that like retains memories of the creatures that are buried under it.
Okay.
So it could be something where like it like obtains knowledge through consumption, and
Okay, yeah, I like
so
that. So
you can use like a piece of the tree, essentially like there's a specific part of the tree at its center, maybe like under the tree, that if you kill it you can like use it to store a memory or something temporarily.
okay,
So it'd be
see
like
that.
a common level magic item maybe.
Or possibly it has some sort of something that crystallizes on the inside of it, kind of like an amber or an ambergris.
Right.
That would
Well, again, it's
also
eating living flesh, and it's going to be eating adventurers or stuff like that. So maybe the armor or the metallic parts get crystallized, and so you can get this lump of basically metal ore that blacksmiths can use and process out.
possibly, yeah.
I imagine digging up all of the buried treasure would take a while, but it's probably all still there.
because if it's, absorbing like the bones and stuff, something akin to like pearls
Yeah.
growing within that, where the calcium deposits from whatever it happens to be eating start.
Oh, keep going about it. I think I've got an idea. You know,
Okay.
woodworkers, they get the bowls on the tree, like you get those big
Yeah,
knots
the
on the trees that
burls.
the
Yeah.
woodworkers like, yeah, they make bowls and stuff out of. What if you were saying like a pearl, and that's what insists either like the pearl, that's the bone, or the metal, and so you go and that's what you can take off of the tree and take in. It's these growths that, once they've consumed so much inorganic material, they form some of these.
Okay. Yeah. I like that. I like that. So,
And it kind of was what I was thinking of at first was kind of like owl pellets.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
yeah.
this is like the tree version of an owl pellet.
Well, it isn't actually a tree.
Ironically, if an
Yeah.
owl lands on it, it gets devoured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a little poof of feathers. Wait, what happened?
All right. James, do you want to do the second roll? You want me to do the second roll?
Go ahead and do it. I didn't bring my dice over with me today.
All right. 99. Get to go all the way down to the bottom of the list. Roll twice on the table.
Hey.
So, Josh, you want to give me another one, and I'll do another one, and
Sure.
we'll see what we get.
Chaos with who?
49.
49. Causes serious anaphylaxis reaction if eaten.
I mean, that sounds right.
Yeah. No, that's... I bite you,
All
you don't
right.
bite me.
Yeah. Okay, and then I got a 62. Increases local gravity minutely. A herd or flock can double or even triple local gravity.
I like that. It slows things down so it's more easier to grab them or pound them. And I would even say it would
Oh,
give
that
a
that
bonus to
that
slashing
that
damage.
bludgeoning attack. Yeah, that's going to
Yeah.
hit harder
Yeah.
because of that.
And I would say, you know what? Follow me on this one. The anaphylaxis, if eaten, this thing eats meat, so you're not likely going to eat a tree, but maybe that also happens if you burn it. So if you hit it with fire
Yes.
as a defense,
Like the what is that tree that grows in like Tasmania that's like super poisonous to touch it, and the sap on it that drips off
oh
is
yes, the poison
caustic,
apple
and
tree. Yes,
yeah,
that or like the oleander
Yeah.
bushes, they have
like
like they don't tell
everything about it is just wanting to
going to
kill you.
kill
It
you.
is the tree that wants to kill you.
Poison
Dude, I
ivy
love
and
this
poison
thing.
oak will do that too. So
Yeah, no, I love this. Oh, poison oak in your lungs. Oh,
yeah, it's
pass on
bad.
that one.
Yeah.
It's real bad.
Dude, I love this thing. This thing's awesome.
All right.
And they come in packs of 11. Was it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Well, it's
they grow in small
groves.
groves. Yeah.
Yeah, they're growing
Yeah.
small groves. Yeah.
They're gonna look like the
Yeah.
mandrake trees. You ever seen the
They-
mandrake trees in the swamp?
Are they all individuals or are they clones? Like, do they clone through the roots? And then there's just like a bunch of them that.
Ooh.
Yeah, I could see
I
that.
could see
Like,
either one.
um, it is an asexual reproduction where it's almost like a mitosis sort
Okay.
of deal, where once it grows big enough, it'll
Get pups.
separate off a piece of the subterranean portion of it that burrows off and then grows up a new growth.
Yeah. No, I like that. Good call.
Because I imagine it, once its trunk is in place, it can't move, right?
Yeah.
So like it does burrow its roots, and its roots can move, but it like the trunk stays stationary.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I like that. Great call.
Yeah,
This thing's
that was
awesome.
great.
I love it.
Yeah. we always have such great ideas when we do these sorts of things. And are we good with calling it a Widowmaker? Or,
Yeah, I
or do
think
you
that's a
have
great
do you
name.
have another name for it?
it might also be called like a bone tree because of the cysts that grow on it, right? Because that would be all probably like a
Okay.
bone pearl essentially.
Okay. An oyster wood.
That's good.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to think
I
because
want to.
Something with graves.
I'm thinking something haggish since it's in a swamp, because hags are going to have these things nearby.
Just a hag tree.
Hag tree would work, yeah.
or call it something like a hag oak or
Yeah.
something along those lines.
Mimic treant.
A coven grove.
False treant.
False
Yeah.
treant, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Actually, the burrowing kind of reminds me of the like false hydra hands thing
yes.
too.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So yeah, I like that where depending on who you're talking to, if you're talking to the scholars, the people who keep their noses in books all day, they're going to call them, oh, those are false treants. But the people
Yes.
who actually go walking out into the swamp and actually live in the area, they're like, no, those are widowmakers.
Yeah.
Because you walk into a grove of those and you're not walking home.
Yeah.
It's one
Well,
of
so they have
those
that
deals.
colloquial name. Yeah, I
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, widowmakers being
Yeah.
the colloquial name.
I like
Yeah, I
it.
don't think you'd want to run into. I'm think these sound like they're probably like CR like 10 to 13 maybe probably, and you're encountering like at least 5 at once probably based on
Yeah.
like the radius that they'd have.
I don't know. I think you could
It could be lower.
probably make these somewhere in the neighborhood of CR 5 to 6.
Yeah.
Because the
It's nice to have
roper is
maneuverability.
Roper's a CR 5 and 5e.
That's true.
So
That's true.
so something like
But
that.
it can't bury creatures, and it doesn't choke them to death when it's lit on fire.
Well, you light it
There
on
is
fire
that.
and you get that anaphylactic reaction.
Yeah, there is that.
So that's an issue.
So maybe
It can swallow,
somewhere
it can
in
bash.
the because I think a treant is CR 9.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe.
I think it's a CR 9. But yeah, but whenever you start getting it, you can get a grove of these things. Where
Yeah, that would be a bad day.
if you're clever and you're careful and you can point out where they are, you could take them one at a time. You could clear them one at a time. But if you're not paying good attention and you happen to get into the middle of 3 or 4 of them, you're gonna have a bad day.
Like I said, I kind of picture this as like a hag coven has either worked out some sort of deal with them or maybe had found one and kind of trimmed back new growth. So where they kind of surround their hut or their cave or wherever their coven is. And so that's kind of like their outer protection before you actually get to the hags.
So what do you think their defense is against like long range attacks, right? Like, do they have infinite range with their roots? Probably not. But
I'd
otherwise
give them
you have
maybe
like
10 or
someone
20 feet.
back with a longbow. Like, are they just immune to like piercing damage or like weapon damage? Like,
I would say they're probably resistant to piercing.
Resistant or immune to non-magical weapons.
Yeah.
That would probably be the first thing to go onto that. Because, I mean, you go and shoot arrows, you plinking arrows into this thing, you can shoot a tree with 100 arrows and
it's gonna be fine.
Right.
Trivial damage. I mean, eventually they start to add up, but you're going to run out of arrows long before you take down that tree.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, if you went up to it with an axe, sure, that might work, but then you're going to get swallowed or bashed or both.
Yeah. I feel like it must have some defense against range attacks. Otherwise, your solution is to just stand back and shoot it until it's dead. Even if it's fire, right? Because
you'd have to recognize it though too, because it has that mimic ability.
It is that ambush predator.
It waits until you're right next to it, or like 10 feet away, so you can't hit it with an axe.
Attack the gazebo just in case.
Yeah, and it's definitely going to be a thing where it's going to wait until the melee characters are in range.
Yeah,
or maybe it's one of those things where you end up having to take an action to free an ally from a grapple because the root came up and grabbed hold of them.
Yeah. What if the roots are more vulnerable than the tree, and so you can only really attack it. So like once it's active, like the roots come up and they're all like out, and so you can attack the roots while it's up, but then it can hide the roots, and then it sort of becomes very resistant or almost invulnerable to like most forms of damage.
Yeah. and
I like that.
I could definitely see, because it is this sort of tree sort of creature, it is vulnerable to fire damage,
Yeah.
which
But
encourages that sort of, let's hit it with some fire, and then
Cast
the
a
poison
fireball.
gas comes out.
That's a huge
That
trade-off.
lulling them
that's
into
great.
that false sense of security.
Yeah, I
Like,
love
oh,
that.
we'll just use some fire and be done with it. It's like, no, you
Of
won't.
course, you also probably could make an argument. So it could have like a almost like rubbery bark, right? And it could even be like potentially resistant to fire because it grows in a swamp. It could potentially bring up a whole bunch of mud onto itself or like coat itself in water, right? To try
Right?
and
Yeah.
maybe it's vulnerable normally, but it can like it has these tools to like put itself out normally.
Hmm.
Um,
Those all
so
work.
you have like a bonus action that's like splash some mud on it and put out fire. But whenever it takes fire damage, it's vulnerable and also gets set on fire, like automatically.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay. All right. Well, that was fun.
that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So the other thing that we like to do is to have our guests give a shout out to someone else in the community. It can be another creator, podcaster, artist, musician, whatever. Just somebody else in the TTRPG sphere that you feel deserves a little bit of recognition. So who would you like to give a shout out to today?
Yeah. Oh man, there are so many good people. I really like the Cast Eye podcast. Everyone over there is really great. Mark is an amazing DM, and recently they've been doing a whole bunch of shows with other people like Lex or Technomiki on Twitter. And yeah, they have such a great show, and all of the people on that are amazing players and DMs, and I highly recommend checking them out.
All right. And finally, before we sign off, take a minute to plug yourself, where we can find you, where we can find your stuff, the Kickstarter that's getting ready to start, where we can find information on that, all of that stuff. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I'm most active on Twitter at Lone Colossus, and I also have Facebook and Instagram at Lone Colossus Games. My website is lonecolossusgames.com, and pretty much everything that I've published you can find there or links to them on Drive-Thru RPG. The Kickstarter, there are links to the landing page where you can sign up for the email notification, and then of course when you sign up it'll send you an email saying, hey, sign up for the pre-launch page. You can go do that. We actually just broke 700 pre-launch page followers today, which is super cool.
Yeah.
That launches on Tuesday, so
Awesome.
on the 31st of May, because I think the video comes out after that.
Perfect.
Yeah, when we the release of this as an episode is coming out on
Right.
June 1st, so
Right.
it will
Yes.
have, if you're listening / watching when the podcast episode goes live, it started yesterday.
Yesterday, yeah.
Yes.
So we are live. So go visit, pledge, because yeah, like I said, this is actually a really, really fun. There's a lot of really cool stuff in this book.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, Josh, thank you so very much for joining us
Thank
today
you.
for Undercommon Taste. It has been a blast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
very much.
And thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. If you have any comments, suggestions, or ideas, please send us an email, undercommontaste@gmail.com, or send us a direct message through our Twitter account @UCT Homebrew. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, TikTok, and YouTube. Just search Undercommon Taste. We're also on Patreon, patreon.com/Undercommon Taste. That's where we put all of our write-ups. Most of our write-ups are free. Some of them are patron exclusive. Our most recent patron exclusive content has been our Urban Ranger variant class, and that is available to all patrons of all tier levels. So please, if you'd like to help support the show financially, come over to Patreon and consider becoming a member. Finally, we are on Discord. You can find a link to our Discord server in the show notes. We'd love to have you come and chat with us.
Yes, it'd be a ton of fun. You can find our podcast, if this is your first time listening to us, welcome. But you can find us wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're on Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify. I believe we're on TuneIn now, you said?
And TuneIn and Podchaser, yes.
Yeah, so we are at a lot of different places. So please feel free, subscribe, and then give us a rating and review. This helps increase our visibility and lets us know what you want to hear more of.
Join us next week. We are going to be not going back into Gehenna just yet.
We needed a break.
we needed a break, and an opportune moment came up.
Yes.
Original friend of the show, Dr. Mary C. Crowell, who you may remember from our 1-year anniversary live play. She just released a new album, and
Yes,
so
she
we
did.
will be chatting with her. It will be on our Twitch channel on Sunday, June 5th, and it will be our next episode on June 8th. So come
Perfect.
and join us for that. So thank you once more for watching. Stay safe, and we will see you next week.
Happy gaming.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Undercommon Taste. You can find links to all of our social media accounts, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, as well as our Patreon and Discord channel in the show notes. Our theme song is Massacre Anne, written and performed by Mary Crowell and used with permission. You can find more of her work at marycrowell.bandcamp.com or on Patreon at patreon.com/Dr. Mary C. Crowell. Our logo was illustrated by David Sutherland. You can find him on Instagram at willex_73 or on DeviantArt at deviantart.com/David Sutherland. Thanks again for listening. Stay safe. We'll see you again next week.